The year is 1926. E.L. Cord approaches the Duesenberg brothers about making the best car money, no object, could buy. The car would be known as the Model J Duesenberg. The heart of the Model J was a technological marvel, sophisticated, powerful piece of art. This was the most powerful inline 8 to ever come out of America. But before getting into this engine, a bit of background. Two brothers of 7 kids total, Fredrick and August, who went by the names of Fred and Augie, were born in Germany, immigrated to the US in 1885, just 4 years after their dad died. They were in the farm equipment business, and then they ventured into the bicycle/motorcycle business and racing. Fred really had a knack for all things mechanical. Around 1900, they started experimenting with the internal combustion engine. In 1906, Fred and Augie would meet an Iowa lawyer by the name of Edward Mason, who put up capital for the two brothers to build their 2-cylinder car. The car company was called Mason Motor Car Company. FL Maytag would acquire majority interest in the company and would reorganize it as Maytag Mason Motor Company by 1909. That partnership would dissolve by 1912. Mason Motor Car Company would cease 1 year later in 1913. In 1910, Duesenberg would build their 4-cylinder walking beam engine, which would get its own episode one day. Duesenberg built some of the best racing engines from 1912 through 1932, but it's important to note that in 1913, Duesenberg moved to St. Paul, Minnesota and established Duesenberg Motor Car Company. They would go until 1919 when they relocated to Indianapolis, Indiana in 1920. They changed their name to Duesenberg Automobile and Motors Company. In 1924, the company was placed in receivership. To be honest, Fred and Augie, they were not businessmen. They were engineers. In 1926, a man by the name of E.L. Cord, a man with insanely deep pockets, would buy Duesenberg. And he would tell the brothers, I want to offer a car that outpaces everything else available. I want to offer the best car money could buy. E.L. Cord knew the Duesenberg brothers were engineers, so he brought in Gordon Burrig to do the bodies. The Duesenberg Model J was born. The engine was designed by Fred Duesenberg. The engine was produced by Lycoming Foundry and Machine Shop in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, another company that was owned by E.L. Cord. E.L. Cord owned 150 companies by 1929. The Model J Duesenberg was witnessed for the very first time at the New York Auto Show in 1928. It was a tour de force. It would be like seeing a brand new Bugatti Chiron. It was like looking at the future. The Model T could barely go 40 miles an hour. This could go over 100. It's important to note all Duesenbergs were built in 1928, but it took them until 1937 to sell them all, and they were all titled the year that they were sold. When one bought a Duesenberg, they would sell you the chassis, which was the engine, drivetrain, fenders, 6 wire wheels, and tires, lights, dash, gauges for $8,500. You could have Duesenberg build you a body, or you could take it to any coach builder like LeBaron, Judkins, Murphy, Briggs, Walker, among many others, with the body that could push the price up to $14,000 all the way up to $25,000. In today's money, if you spent 25 grand in 1928, that would be equivalent to $463,000 today. Everything about the Duesenberg Model J is a work of art. The engine, 420 cubic inch displacement, dual overhead cam, 4 valves per cylinder, overhead valves. The car featured 4-wheel hydraulic brakes, which was industry first. Penthouse combustion chambers with spark plugs located in the center of the combustion chamber, so flame front has minimal distance to travel. Timing box, which was mounted adjacent to the fuel pump, and driven from the fuel pump shaft. 700 miles, a light flashes to change the oil. 1,400 miles, a different light comes on to let you know to add water to the battery. 75 miles, it opens a spring release valve mounted on the fuel pump housing, which allows oil to be forced under engine oil pump pressure to lubricate chassis components, including spring shackles, clutch throwout bearing, shock absorber connections. The timing box consisted of 4 sets of small planetary gears arranged in a series with ratios of 4.8 to 1. Full pressurized oiling lubrication system. The lower half of the crankcase is built out of a heat-treated aluminum casting with deep cooling fins, both inner and outer surfaces. Camshafts are hollow to allow oil to pass through them. This engine has a crankcase ventilation. The block is specifically selected gray cast iron, Ray Day aluminum alloy pistons with 3 compression rings and 1 oil ring, floating wrist pin. The crankshaft is double-headed, chrome nickel forged steel with 5 main bearings, fully counterweighted crankshaft with 2 cartridges that are filled with mercury that attach to the opposite ends of the crankshaft that smooth out any vibrations. Crankshaft is 42 inches long and weighs 150 pounds. The camshafts and accessories are driven by the crank by a pair of heavy-duty 3-row chains and sprocket. Remember, belts are for peasants. This thing's got a beefy chain, and even this looks very Art Deco. This was essentially a race engine for the streets. Duesenberg made this engine in 3 iterations. Starting with the Model J engine, 420 cubic inch displacement, dual overhead cam, inline 8, 6.9 liters. It's good for 265 horsepower at 4,200 RPM, 374 pound-feet, or 507 newton meters at 2,000 RPM, with a bore of 3.75 inches and a stroke of 4.75 inches. Compression is 5.2 to 1. Engine weighs 1,150 pounds, 5 main bearings, 32 valves or 4 valves per cylinder. Years this engine was used was from 1928 to 1937. They built anywhere between 472 to 481, sources conflict, of Model J. Price for the chassis, $8,500, which is equivalent to you spending $157,420 in 2023. Ads would claim 90 miles an hour in second gear, 116 miles an hour top speed. Moving on to the second version, which was called the SJ. Introduced in 1932, 420 cubic inch displacement, dual overhead cam, inline 8, 6.9 liters, but this baby's supercharged. So it makes 320 horsepower at 4,750 RPM, 425 pound-feet, or 576 newton meters at 2,400 RPM. Bore and stroke sizes are the same, compression is the same. 0 to 60 could be had in 10 seconds. Years this engine was produced was from 1932 through 1937. Only 36 were produced. Price. The chassis for this one was $11,750, which would be equivalent to you spending $271,615.75 in the year 2023. Let's talk superchargers for a minute. What is a supercharger? What does it do? It compresses the intake gases, forcing more air into the engine to make more power, baby. The biggest difference between turbocharging and supercharging. Supercharging takes power to make more power, baby. The supercharger is either belt-driven or gear-driven from the engine's crankshaft, whereas turbocharger uses kinetic energy from the exhaust gases to produce more power. There are 2 main families of supercharger: positive displacement and dynamic. Positive displacement, which delivers nearly fixed volume air per revolution of the compressor. Most common types are Roots type, rotary type, sliding vane, scroll type. The other family is dynamic. The compressors rely on accelerating air to high speed, then exchanging that velocity for pressure by diffusing or slowing it down. Major types: centrifugal and multi-stage axial flow. Duesenberg Model J uses centrifugal supercharger. Makes use of centrifugal force in order to increase manifold air pressure, which allows engine to burn more fuel, resulting in higher power output. Which leads us to the biggest and baddest Duesenberg engine, the SSJ, which they only made two of. They were on a shorter wheelbase, 420 cubic inch displacement, dual overhead cam, inline 8, 6.9 liters. This puppy's good for 400 horsepower, 5,000 RPM. Bore and stroke are the same. This one was fed with two carburetors instead of one. Theoretical top speed of 150 to 160 miles per hour, 0 to 60, 7.8 seconds. Years this engine was produced was between 1935 and 1936. Only two were made. In 1932, Fred Dusenberg was out driving a prototype passenger car, high-power engine, and he ended up losing control on a wet road, Lincoln Highway, Ligonier Mountain, 2 miles west of Jennerstown, Pennsylvania. The car rolled over, ejecting Fred from the car. He was in bad shape. He had a spinal injury, dislocated his shoulder, but was expected to make a full recovery. He ended up getting pneumonia and he died July 26th, 1932, at the ripe old age of 55 years old. These high luxury cars were on sale when the country was going through some of the worst economic times we ever saw in the United States. Duesenberg would build cars until 1937, but it's worth mentioning they did build one other car in 1940. That was the last Duesenberg that the original company made, built with parts and pieces left over from the original Duesenberg factory. Duesenberg would succumb to the effects of the Great Depression in 1937, but I think it's safe to say that E.L. Cord built a car that outpaced everything else. This was the most sophisticated, most powerful engine America ever made for cars in the 30s. What a work of art, what a legacy. All right, now it's time for Would You Rather. Two scenarios today. In the first scenario, would you rather have 1932 Duesenberg Model J Tourster or 1934 Duesenberg Model J by LeBaron or 1934 Duesenberg Walker Coupe? I'm going to leave this here for a minute. If you need more time, feel free, pause the video. Moving on to the second scenario, 1930 Duesenberg Grabber, which kind of looks like a Delahaye to me, 1935 Duesenberg Town Car, or 1933 Duesenberg 20 grand. I'm going to leave this here for a minute. If you need more time, feel free, pause the video. Now it's time for Name That Tune. First person to get both the name of the band and the song title correctly in the comment section will have your comment pinned to the top of it. Thank you all so much for coming out and watching this. If you'd like to get in touch with me, shoot me a comment in the comment section below, or check out our Facebook group that correlates with this YouTube channel. I call it the After Party. It gives you the opportunity to share your rides, stories, experiences. Anything car related is a go there. If you don't have Facebook and would still like to reach me, send me an email. All of it will be linked in the description below. Just know I appreciate everything that you guys bring in the comment section. I love the stories. I love the comments. I love the critiques. Until next time,